ever could have imagined.
From Ecclesiastes. I came to hate all my hard work here on earth, for I must leave to others everything I have earned. And who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish? Yet they will control everything I have gained by my skill and hard work under the sun. How meaningless. So I gave up in despair, questioning the value of all my hard work in this world. Some people will work wisely with knowledge and skill, then must leave the fruit of their efforts to someone who hasn't worked for it. This, too, is meaningless, a great tragedy. So what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night, their minds cannot rest. It is all meaningless. What do people really get for all their hard work? I have seen the burden God has placed on us all. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So I concluded there is nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Amen.
You working hard or hardly working? The voice belonged to the produce manager, Steve. He was pushing a cart stacked high with Chiquita banana boxes, and his words startled me from my daydream. I was supposed to be helping him unload the new shipment. This was the first paying job that I ever had. Stock boy at a local grocery store. It was a distinctly practical line of work. Stock the shelves, take inventory, mop the floor, take out the trash, among other things. You could do worse for an after-school job, but I can't say that it was especially gratifying or meaningful work. We weren't making the world a better place or anything, just toiling away at minimum wage for the profit of the store's owner, a man we'd never seen or met. It'd be years before I landed a job that really meant something to me, a job that I felt called to, where I could really believe that I was making a difference, a job at Dunkin' Donuts. After all, America runs on Dunkin'. You working hard or hardly working? I blinked, remembered what I was supposed to be doing, and Steve gave me a grin. Steve wasn't my boss, not really, though he minded the store when the manager was out. And he wasn't giving me a hard time. Now, Steve was the cool guy that all of the younger employees looked up to, the laid-back dude in his early 30s with a red sports car and a winning smile. Steve took his job seriously enough, and he expected us to do the same. But when things slowed down a little bit at the store, he didn't mind letting us kick the proverbial ball around. Well, okay, I won't mince words. He literally gave us a football to kick around. I just read somewhere that people who play fantasy football on the job cost American businesses over $13 billion a year in lost revenue and productivity. But we played real football on the job. Usually in the parking lot, but this one time we actually played in the store. Racing through the aisles, dodging customers, landing touchdowns in the frozen food department. Inevitably, the football actually ended up smashing right through the deli counter and landing in the fried chicken. But Steve covered for us. The next day, he told the boss that we were working so hard, mopping the floor so vigorously that we lost control of the mop handle and sent it sailing through the glass. Working hard or hardly working? Back then, we did a little bit of both. I haven't spoken to Steve in almost 20 years, but I thought fondly of him this summer when I saw all of those Chiquita banana boxes again. There must have been thousands of them at the Greater Boston Food Bank, each of them filled with an assortment of various household products and prepackaged food. You see, The food bank was one of the work sites we'd been assigned on this year's annual senior high work camp mission trip. We were split into crews and assigned various stations alongside the winding conveyor belt that carried all of these cardboard boxes. Some crews were responsible for filling up the boxes, others for organizing them. For my part, I, and along with a couple of the youth, were tasked with quality control. Just, making sure that nothing was broken or leaking or packaged in the wrong box. The floor manager had an interesting sense of humor. He snuck a rubber rat into one of the boxes to try to scare me. I could tell that he'd done this many times and that for him the joke never got old. And once everything checked out, rodents notwithstanding, I'd get it back on the conveyor belt and watch it disappear into some mysterious chute, its final destination beyond our sight, never to be seen again. The Boston Food Bank provides about 60 million pounds of food to people throughout eastern Massachusetts, amounting to almost as many meals per year. And we sorted through about 30,000 pounds in just a few hours. There's no question that it was time well spent. But I gotta say, I've been going on these trips for close to a decade now, and I have to tell you, this year felt very different from those that came before. When I first saw the words work camp in the job description for my position here at the church, I was a little startled, taken aback. I'd never been on a trip like this in my own youth. And the words work camp immediately called to mind images of a Deep South chain gang a la Cool Hand Luke and a Soviet labor camp all rolled into one. What kind of a church is this? I thought to myself. In reality, while the work is, of course, not forced labor, it really has been pretty intense. Roofing, painting, flooring, landscaping, plumbing, drywall installation, heavy-duty demolition, much of it done in the summer heat of the Deep South, some of it in the rain and in the mud, all of it hardcore. Work camp has always been hard, filthy, sweaty work, and for reasons I'll never understand, that's always been how our work campers like it. This year was a little different. Not better or worse, just different. We still worked on maintenance and repair projects, but most of our efforts were more relational. We focused more of our attention on people. In the basement of an old church building in downtown Boston, we cooked food for an influx of homeless guests. We sat down and ate with them, chatting about the Red Sox and life on the street. Outside a local elementary school, the kind of place where kids seldom went to class before dedicated teachers started knocking on their doors and walking them to school. We played games with the kids, our own youth losing themselves in the moment, acting like kids themselves. In the common room of a halfway house for women recovering from addiction, we were invited to sit and listen as they shared their stories and prayed with each other. On Boston Common, we gathered together for worship with a congregation called Common Cathedral, a church comprised largely of homeless men and women and others who don't feel welcome inside more traditional churches. Sharing peanut butter sandwiches, I listened to a man tell me about how he ended up on the street and lost everything after his fiancée died in a car wreck. We met a lot of people. We heard a lot of stories. We didn't tear down any condemned buildings or build any houses from the ground up, though I did personally replace 3 doorknobs for the church that hosted us, all by myself. But we did a lot of listening. And sometimes that's what people need more than anything else. To the casual observer, it may not have looked like we were doing much work this year. A fly on the wall might have seen us playing juvenile card games at all hours of the night that involved an inexplicable amount of screaming. Might have seen us singing bluegrass gospel songs in the church attic while our interim youth minister, Neil, strummed ferociously on his guitar. Might have watched us standing around for 3 hours at a bus stop in the afternoon heat glaring at the local bus drivers who wouldn't accept our prepaid transit cards or the increasingly generous bribes that one of our chaperones kept on offering. Guess that right there is the difference between Boston and Chicago. But more than anything, we could be found cooking food, sitting around, eating, and getting to know people who we wouldn't normally talk to. Nothing grandiose, not much to look at. An observer might have been tempted to sarcastically ask, working hard or hardly working? But then they might have asked the same thing of Jesus, who spent much of his time doing the same thing. It's actually a question I've been asked myself at work camp over the years as the self-appointed videographer. For 9 years, while everyone else was pounding nails and wielding sledgehammers and dripping with sweat, I've watched it all through the lens of a video camera, chronicling the memories being made and the work being done and bringing it back to all of you in videos like the one that you're going to see in a short while. Now, for the first time this year, I handed this responsibility off to someone else, to one of our youth, Polly Cooper, who did all of the filming and editing herself. And that's the only reason I had time to install all those doorknobs. I mean, I'm only one man. And Polly's done a remarkable job. But as appreciative as people have been of the videos, I've often been accused, half-jokingly, but only half, of hardly working, despite the weeks of effort that go into the final product. Why don't you do some real work, Seth? The youth would often say to me, their tired faces drenched in sweat. Of course, I could hardly hear them from behind the glass of the air-conditioned car where I sat with my video camera pointed out the window, sipping a glass of lemonade. It's just human nature, I guess, to place a higher premium on work that produces immediate and obvious results. We love our metrics and our analytics, 60,000 pounds of food and all that, right? How do you measure the quality of a conversation or an experience, or dare I say, a work of art, or the impact that these things might eventually have? The author of Ecclesiastes is not interested in such intangible long-term results. He dismisses any effort that doesn't yield fruit right now as being utterly useless, a waste of his time. He doesn't want to plant seeds if they're just going to be harvested by someone else at a later date. He laments that anything he does will be left to someone else to either build upon or to enjoy. I've seen that same frustration in our work campers over the years when they toil away all week on a project and then have to leave before it's finished. Knowing that another volunteer group will come in to get the job done is cold comfort because they'll never get to see the fruit of their labor with their own eyes. And if we can't see what we've accomplished, can't lay our hands on it and touch it, isn't it hard to believe that we've accomplished anything at all? As I stood in the food bank and sorted through another box of donated food, I had a little bit of an epiphany. I was spacing out a little, much as I used to do as a young stock boy, and just staring at the Chiquita logo and the bananas on the side of the box, when I remembered that I had seen these boxes before. Back when I was a teenager, I saw them on Steve's produce cart, but I also saw them the day before when I was making lunch at the soup kitchen. These boxes were all over the place in that basement. This means something, I thought to myself. And as I watched the box go down the conveyor belt and disappear into the darkness beyond, I realized that it was a small part of a greater work that I couldn't hope to see. But I'd glimpsed it. You see, the Chiquita banana box is more than just clever product placement in this sermon. It's a symbol of God's transcendent work and a reminder that God's work is bigger than any single job, The box traveled from a grocery store where some bored stock clerk emptied its contents to the food bank where our volunteers filled them back up with needed provisions, and then on to soup kitchens all over Boston where people came together at a table and broke bread with each other, broke bread with us. And then the box was probably off again to be recycled for some other unknown purpose. Looking back, I saw that even something as small as emptying a box of bananas as an underpaid stock boy had its purpose, as dull and meaningless as it may have seemed to me at the time. And I realized then that everything we do in this life is a work in progress, something to be used and enjoyed and built upon by someone else. I mean, we can build a house from the ground up, see it through to completion, put on all the finishing touches, but it still isn't finished. The people who live there will continue to build upon it, not just physically, but with their lives and with the memories that they make there. We're all like workers on an assembly line, each of us doing our part to build something greater, but never seeing the end result. We can't see where that conveyor belt ends. And after some soul searching, the author of Ecclesiastes comes to the same conclusion, that we can't see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. And as bitter as he can sometimes be, he finds it in his heart to trust that God makes everything beautiful in its time. Working hard or hardly working? Sometimes the line between the two is awfully hard to see. I guess it's really a question of what you're working on. It's vital that we roll up our sleeves and contribute something to society, that we do everything we can to help others in tangible and meaningful ways. But it takes more than hammers and nails to build community. Sometimes you've also got to just drop everything and play a game of football or a game of cards, or sit down at a table and eat and drink and break bread together. These things contribute to God's work too. Because on work camp and in this church and in our professional and personal lives, whether we're employed or unemployed, and in all the little ways that we each strive to live as Jesus taught us, we're all building a world, one piece at a time, where people can sit down at a table peaceably and serve one another instead of just serving themselves. I don't know if it's a work that will ever be complete or a world that I'll ever live to see. But in Boston, for just a little while, we glimpsed it. We sat down at that table. And now, it's time to get back to work. Amen.